very much indeed, and I must say it's a bit like coming to a home from home, because I've just been given by Harry Harrison, who's here somewhere, where are you, Harry? A copy of a leaflet we produced together in 1982 on a duplicator, on absorbent paper, but it survived. It's part of history. It was a festival we were putting on. And thank you to everyone that's spoken today, because this platform, we've all been out knocking on doors together, we've all been campaigning together, and we're going to be doing a lot of campaigning together in the future. So thanks ever so much for what you said today, for the work you do for the party, and how we take things forward. Kate actually understated her case, as she so often does. She is an absolutely brilliant newly elected Member of Parliament for Edmonton, and I'm really proud to campaign for her in the general election campaign in Edmonton, and she had such an amazing rapport with people, even though she was a fairly newly selected candidate. They saw in Kate somebody decent, warm, human, and who was going to stand up for them, and they were coming out the doors just to shake her hand and say, we're proud to be voting for you. And when she says that she is part of this campaign, it's a bit more than that, actually. We were having discussions about whether or not to put up a candidate in this election or not. And Kate was sitting opposite me in a meeting room doing this, and she just pointed and said, it's you. I said, what do you mean it's you? She said, you are the one we're putting forward. Now go and do it. Thank you, Kate. It's been an amazing experience, and I want to just say thank you to everyone that's come along this afternoon. But first of all, I want to say a big thank you to all the volunteers who've helped put these events on, because they don't happen by accident. By the end of this campaign, including the official hustings, we will have done almost 100 events since June, all over the UK. We've been in Scotland, Wales, we've been in Dublin, we've been in Belfast, we've been in Brussels, and we've been to every major town and city in the whole country. Often our meetings and events are arranged at quite short notice, because there's all sorts of logistical problems about fitting everything in, and our volunteer team are absolutely amazing. And a lot of it is done by social media, by Facebook, by Twitter, and by encouraging people to come along. And the meetings often fill up very, very quickly. So I'm grateful to all of you for coming along at quite short notice and missing a cold, wet afternoon on the seafront in Margate. But I've been checking the weather forecast, and about 4 o'clock it's going to be okay. So it kind of works, doesn't it, really? So you can go out there and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. And there are many people that have worked very hard, not just for this event, but for so many other events in the Labour Party and Labour movement in Thanet. But I can't come to an event like this without saying a very special thanks to two very good friends of mine who were with me in Islington North for many years. One was my agent, the other worked with me in my office, a very good friend. So please put your hands together to say thank you to Keith and Barry for A couple of points about our campaign. After the general election defeat in May, we were all very depressed, of course. We're very angry, of course. A lot of people have a very good reason to be very angry, because they know what's coming down the track with the Tories with a, albeit small, but overall majority. They know the legislation that's on the way, and they know the difficulties that are going to be ahead. We, as a party, have to face some quite uncomfortable truths about why we lost that election. We have to face some uncomfortable truths about what we were offering or not offering in the last election. And I think it would have been, frankly, better if the party, instead of rushing into an election campaign, had had a serious period for about a year of discussing and debating policies and principles of the Labour Party. There's no God-given right for any political party to exist. It exists because it has principles, because it has objectives, because of what it wants to achieve. We didn't do that. Instead, we had an election campaign. We, and I say we, not just I, decided to enter this so that we could ensure there was an alternative point of view put, there was an alternative voice being put. And our campaign has a number of quite important principles about it. As you, I'm I'm sure nobody here reads some of the newspapers that are sold on some of the newsstands. But if you happen to see them over somebody's shoulder on a bus or a train, you might be aware of some of the not very kind things that have been said about our campaign, and in some cases very personally about me. I just see things this way. I personally never do any kind of personal attack on anybody. I don't give out any abuse to anybody. I don't respond to any abuse that's given to us. Life is too short, and the politics and situation that people face are far too important to reduce politics to that puerile level. Secondly, we have developed in Britain a process where policy making in all parties comes from a highly centralised party organisation. Party leaders are put up as icons, gods, or whatever you want to call them, who are all-seeing, all-knowing, wonderful, intelligent people who can then decide on every policy and everything and pass it down the food chain for everybody else to carry out and knock on the doors for. I'm sorry, that's not my idea of a democracy. It's not my life's experience. And what we're doing is offering a whole series of different policy alternatives. We've sent out, as in my campaign already, at least 12 policy papers: economy, environment, arts, education, railways, investment in the north of England, very many issues, and particularly one we did on safety and security of women, which was written by a group of women in our campaign. All of them are there for debate, all of them are there for consultation, all of them we welcome replies on, and we will then rewrite them on the basis of the replies we get and how the whole process develops. And I think this is a system the Labour Party has to adopt as a whole. We cannot go on having remote policy making where people decide somewhere in a remote location, this is what works on the basis of focus group X, opinion poll Y, or what's said in the Financial Times last week, or what the Daily Mail might say next week. Can't we work from the basis that everyone who is a party member or party supporter, or indeed a member of the public, is an intelligent person with lots of life experience and lots of ideas? Let's hear those ideas. Let's hear that life experience. Far more democratic. So it's also about democracy within our party and our movement. The other thing is, everyone here has been on a demonstration at some time in their lives, I'm sure. I won't ask for a show of hands, because it would be embarrassing. Unanimity always looks bad at a meeting. But generally speaking, we go on demonstrations because we're against something. In fact, we're very good at being against things, aren't we, in the Labour movement? We're really good at against this, against that, against that. Yeah, great. Yes, of course, and it's very important to oppose things that we believe to be wrong, believe to be unjust, and take action about it. But what I find fascinating about this campaign is the degree of enthusiasm and optimism, because we're offering that space, we're offering those ideas, we're offering the hope of the way our party can do things very differently in the future, and how we can offer a real alternative vision of how this country develops and goes forward. This is a campaign about optimism, and some of the meetings we're having, all of the meetings are overflowing. All of them have amazing levels of attendance, and all of them are very, very diverse on an age and gender, on ethnicity and language and everything else, because people actually want to be part of an optimistic movement moving forward. So we're not blaming minorities, we're not dishing out blame culture, we're looking for collective solutions to collective problems rather than individual solutions at the expense of somebody else. That is what's powerful and strong. It's reaching out in all parts of Britain. We organised I've been 3 times in Scotland during this campaign, and on the last visit, over a period of 2 days, we organised 4 rallies in Aberdeen, Dundee, Edinburgh and Glasgow. All of them were packed to overflowing, and on the last night in Glasgow, we had more than 2,000 people packed into the old fruit market there. We had music, we had entertainment, we had the speeches, and we had 140 red light bulbs placed in the ceiling by a very enthusiastic volunteer who spent the whole day up a ladder putting these bulbs in, which was very nice of him. It was a very, very nice thing to do. And then we concluded with a great sense of cultural unity by singing Bandera Rosa in Italian in Glasgow. What is better than that? And again, came were from all walks of life and all different approaches to things, because that is what is so exciting about this. So at one level, it's about an election for one position in the Labour Party, but at another level, it's about how we do politics. And it's not just happening here. Look across Europe to similar kinds of movements and growths of public participation in politics. Look across the Atlantic to the USA and the kind of stuff that Bernie Sanders is doing in his campaign to try and get the Democrat nomination in the USA. And indeed, we've been in touch with Bernie Sanders' campaign, or rather he's been in touch with us, and we're sort of exchanging ideas and things like that. So don't run away with the idea that everyone in the USA is incorrigibly right-wing and enamoured of the Tea Party. Not a bit of it. There's a great radical tradition in the USA, just like we've got a great radical tradition in this country. It just needs opening up and unlocking. So, we then have to look at the issues that are facing people. Now, this part of Britain, Thanet, has huge problems. It has problems of poverty, it has problems of unemployment, it has problems of underemployment, it has problems of low quality employment, with a lot of people on 0 hours contracts not knowing what they're going to earn from one week to the next, or indeed often from one day to the next. And it has a housing problem brought of the lack of council housing as a whole, particularly everywhere in Britain for that matter, but it also has a huge problem of the lack of regulation of the private rented sector, where many, many families in this area and indeed in my own constituency and other parts are living in 6 months assured short-hold tenancies and wholly inadequate private rented accommodation with insufficient regulation and no control over the rent levels that are being charged. Then these people that are forced to live in these places are then blamed for the size of the welfare bill, when in reality the welfare bill is subsidising the high levels of rent. And the issues that have to be addressed about investment in infrastructure, investment to ensure that there's a growing economy, growing jobs, particularly growing high-quality, high-end engineering jobs and green industry jobs. All these things are possible, but the free market isn't going to do it on its own. There has to be a degree of public investment, both in infrastructure as well as in housing, as well as in all the other crucial areas of economic development for our society. We are going through a process which we're told is necessary, and that's called austerity. We're told austerity is very important because it'll balance the books in the economy, and once the books are balanced, all will be well. Well, I think we need to think for a moment how austerity came about. We had a banking crisis in 2008 when the largely deregulated international banks invested in the USA, in subprime mortgages, which crashed, invested in many other things that crashed, and ran their whole affairs in a very irresponsible way. The banks then were on the point of total collapse and closure, which would have meant massive damage to the economy, huge levels of job losses, and all that goes with that. The government of the day, our government, 2008, 9, 10 period, had to and did intervene, brought the banks into public ownership, put in £385 billion worth of quantitative easing, which is a form of replacing the debts with government bonds as a way of financing the banks and financing the economy to go with it. So far, so good. The problem with it was that the bank shares that were bought by the public and public ownership of them were then placed in a holding company. The banks were allowed to carry on operating as banks, albeit with a greater degree of regulation, but those shares were placed in a wholly government-owned company, which any Chancellor Exchequer can just dip in and out of and sell those shares. And it's utterly disgraceful that those banks weren't forced to change their whole practices, to invest in infrastructure, invest in social housing, invest in high-quality engineering jobs. Instead, they just carried on like banks, and in some cases were even still encouraging people to put their savings into tax havens. I mean, it sort of strikes me as kind of counterintuitive that you bring an institution into public ownership and then allow it to encourage tax evasion. Doesn't seem to me a very sensible thing to be doing. George Osborne is now selling off a substantial tranche of shares in the Royal Bank of Scotland, to be followed by other bank shares that are sold. Sorry, George, they're not your shares to sell. They're ours that we bought as a public, and I think we should be having some greater control over those banks so that they can be encouraged, if not forced, to invest in a productive economy rather than the way they're doing things at the present time. And if these shares and other public assets are sold under value, as they appear to be at the present time, one of our suggestions, it is a suggestion in our economic document, is that a future Labour government should look very carefully at the price those goods and properties and so on were sold at, and where they've been undersold and somebody's made a great deal of money out of it, then we return to what we did in 1997 when we had a windfall tax on those people that had made outrageous profits in the sale of public assets. So we have to brought us the Equalities Act, brought us the Human Rights Act, brought us so many things that were great achievements in our society. Let's go forward into the rest of the 21st century, not apologising for what went before, but saying, why is it that all the informed commentators say, well, the next generation is going to be worse off than this generation, and the one after that's going to be even worse off than that one, and the one after that, goodness knows what's going to happen to them. Oh, the world's actually got a lot wealthier during that period. There's much more technology available to do lots of things for us and make us much more productive. There's lots of things we can do. Are we so afraid of adopting political principles that ensure our children are educated and housed, our children are able to live longer than we do, our grandchildren are able to live even longer than our own children? You can't do it with a free market alone. You cannot do it by individuals alone. You do it together. You achieve things together. You do things collectively. That's how we make a better society. That is what French society. Thank you very much. I've been told so anyway, but I'm trying not to spend too much time dwelling on that. Yes, there are some people who are very unhappy. There are going to be appointments made by whoever's elected the leader to shadow cabinet positions. There's going to be, I hope, a very rapid change in the way the Labour Party goes about making policy, and I don't doubt there's some very powerful interests in this country that won't like anything that we're saying on austerity, equality, human rights, public ownership, or anything else. People that founded the Labour Party and the trade unions faced far greater odds than anything we find at the present time. Yeah, nothing's going to be simple. I fully understand that. But I also think, hope and expect that a lot of Labour members of Parliament have been elected because the Labour Party chose them to be candidates, because the people of those communities elected them. I hope we're going to understand the politics of what's happening in our society and get on board with the very important, I believe very necessary fundamental changes we make. If we go on being a narrow party offering something that is not significantly economically different to that that's offered by other parties, then do we have a great future or not? If you are to
conquer the problems of poverty, inequality, bad housing and all those things in our society, you can't do it by leaving it to the market. The market has created those problems in the first place. There has to be intervention to deal with it. In the case of your points on Europe, David Cameron is essentially running around Europe saying he wants to get rid of the rights of free movement of people, he wants to get rid of the social chapter, the working time directive, a lot of the environmental protection issues, and essentially make Europe easy, good and free for big business, rather than a sort of social solidarity across Europe of workers' rights, of closing down tax havens and all the other things that the Tories are so desperately unkeen on doing. And so I'm suggesting that in opposition now, we should be involved in that argument, involved in that debate, so that we don't end up with a taxation system which is designed to routinely undercut everybody else's corporation tax in a race to the bottom in which big corporations rise to the top, a secret negotiations of transatlantic trade and investment partnership which will be very damaging to working class interests across Europe, and the damage to environmental and other protection measures. So we're part of that campaign. I wouldn't give any blank cheque to David Cameron on anything, but particularly on this. So I'm saying we should be in there now with our own agenda on social protection and social solidarity.